All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the York Josephine Corridor Study final public meeting. Before we get started, we are going to have an announcement from our language access group.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Francisco. I'm from Language Access LLC. And as with all meetings organized by Dottie, interpretation is being offered. In case you haven't used this feature before, for those on Zoom, go to the bottom right of your screen and click on the interpretation icon, the little globe, and select the language of your choice. For those of you that are present in the room and want interpretation, we have equipment on the left side of the room. There's also additional pieces on the table that you can use to connect and listen to the interpretation. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta reunión de Dottie. Como siempre, Dottie está ofreciendo interpretación al español. Si no han tenido la oportunidad de utilizar este servicio antes y está en Zoom, por favor, seleccione el lobito en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y escoja el idioma de su preferencia. Si se encuentran aquí en la sala, tenemos equipo preparado para que puedan escuchar la interpretación. Aquí a mi mano izquierda o sobre la mesa de interpretación hay equipo adicional. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, boss.
Thank you. All righty. Thank you again for joining us this evening. My name is Mike King. I'm the project manager for this project from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Here with me tonight will be Eileen Yazzie. She'll be presenting on the actual long-term design we'll be going through. We have Chris Callanan and Sherry Moore who will be here. For those that are in person, they're going to be being the microphone handlers. So when we have questions that come up in person, we do need them to be asked into the microphone so that our folks online can hear us as well. Online, for folks online, Devin Mason and Alan Berry are both available. If you have any issues with any online issues, feel free to reach out to them directly in the chat. So tonight, we're going to kind of wrap up this project. We've had 3 public meetings. This is the 4th one. This will be the final one. So we're going to kind of go over what we've talked about for the last year or so, then talk about what the long-term corridor study will look like, looking at segments A, B, and C. As a reminder, what those segments are is broken down by north, central, and south. So segment A is 47th Ave to 40th Ave. Segment B is 40th to 18th. And then segment C is 18th to Colfax. The reason why they're broken that way is because segment A is the two-way couplet, and segment B is typical 4-lane configuration. And then segment C is, again, one of those one-way couplets. We'll touch on the short-term design as well. And then following our presentation, we do have roll plots in the back for folks in person. And then those online, Eileen's going to run through the roll plot slide by slide after this presentation wraps up. So where we are on this project, as I said, final public meeting. We've had 3 of these previously. This is the 4th. We are finalizing our corridor study and presenting to you all the design that we're planning to move forward with for the long-term improvements. For short-term improvements, we're finalizing and tweaking those last-minute changes for the implementation that'll be happening this summer, and that'll specifically be happening between 40th Ave and 18th Ave. That's that 4 to 3 lane conversion. So how did we get here? About 11 months ago, last summer, we had our first public meeting here. We submitted about 400 flyers to the neighborhood, put out about 20 yard signs, put out identification to the council and RNO newsletters. And we had about 40 people attend that meeting, whether they were online or in person. And then in addition to that public meeting, we had a bunch of community touch points. We came to farmers markets, went to block parties, and had about 125 people interact with us at those locations as well. As a result, we had over 100 comments from folks from public meetings, touch points, and then just direct emails as well. What did we learn from that really was making sure first and foremost that we are using our existing plans that have been talked about on this corridor in the past to determine what we're going to do here in the future. Big thing was people want to cross York. This is a neighborhood street. While it is an arterial, it still runs through a neighborhood. It's a residential street. So we understand that this is a barrier for people that are trying to cross York Street in segment B. Improvements could be made to the west end of the park and golf course, really talking about making sure we can, again, cross York to get to the regional destinations such as City Park. Josephine, north of 40th Ave, should be a neighborhood street and not a freight route. As of right now, with the one-way conversion or with a one-way configuration, it really operates as a freight route as well as a residential street. And then talking on the major barriers. So I talked a lot about the east-west barriers to get across York and Josephine, but there's also the major barriers going north-south. 40th Ave right outside the door here is a major barrier with the rail line, I-70 north of here, and then 17th and 18th south of here, really trying to make this a through connection for all roadway users. And then driving behaviors, a lot of people speeding on this corridor, making illegal turns, wanting to make turns where they can't, and then high crash picture as well. And then because this is one of the few north-south connection streets in the city, making sure there's a way to have bikes operate through this area as well. So from that, we came back to you all in our phase 2 engagement between November and December of last year. Very similar outreach methods with the flyering, with the yard signs and council and RNO newsletters. This meeting, we had about 60 people attend, and we also had a survey that went out afterwards that was shared through the meetings, through our website, and then a lot through the community as well, which we really appreciate. Had about 300 survey responses, individual responses, to see what you all supported for the future of this project. As a reminder of what that survey was, we talked about 3 different types of configurations on the corridor. First configuration was what we called reconfiguring the corridor. So in segment A, again, the north side, we would be looking at two-waying those streets. One, York and Josephine right now, again, one-way couplets, making them two-way in each direction. Segment B would be from 40th to 18th, and that's where we're looking at the 4-lane to 3-lane reconfiguration. And then segment C, once again, oh, sorry, I just went down the wrong way. Segment C is a one-way to two-way conversion once again. Segment C, for those that are here to hear more about segment C, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it will be a study that results in a future study. If we're looking at two-waying south of 18th Avenue, we'd have to look at that all the way to First Avenue as well. And there's a little thing called the Colfax BRT that's going in as well, that is going to change traffic patterns a little bit. So there will be recommendations presented, but it's not going to be something that we're going to really move forward with without another study to confirm how that looks for the rest of the corridor. Aside from that, from segment B and segment A, we'll have that full design. Other 2 options that we did present out, dedicated space from transit and dedicated space for biking. These 2 were direct responses to what we heard from you all in phase 1 of our outreach. And both would have pretty significant changes on the corridor. And we'll jump to the responses and we'll show the reason why I was very focused on that first alternative is because that's really what you all were focused on. You can see this is kind of set up the same way you'd look at the map on a street. So north being up, south being down, east to the right, west to the left. So segment A, York, would be the north east part of York Street. Segment A, Josephine, northwest, and then all the way down. As you can see, like I said, there's a trend through all 4 or all 5 of these segments. And it's that reconfiguring the corridor really came out on top from what we heard from you all. The one area where we did see a little bit of a few different areas kind of rising to the top is that segment A on York. And you'll see here again, kind of this in map form as well, where that alternative 1 is really showing as a top priority, and then kind of the unclear preference for that York segment. So we'll get into that when we talk about more of the actual design for the long-term improvements here. And then lastly, 2 months ago now, February, we had one additional engagement opportunity at here, talking about the short-term improvements for segment B. This is the 4 to 3 lane conversion. Again, same outreach methods, flyering, yard signs. We had about 100 people attend. And then we've received, this could be updated now, probably about 50 plus emails supporting and voicing concern and kind of everywhere in between on the improvements that are coming this summer. Mainly what we saw from that meeting and from our outreach was actually general support. Usually we don't get emails that say, we like this project, we want to see it move forward. It's very, it really helps us know that we're kind of moving in the right direction when we see that information. There were concerns that came from you all as well, though, making sure that we're not only focusing on York, that this is moving, we're making sure we're not moving a crash picture from York Street to the parallel streets in this neighborhood. Concerns about vehicle congestion on York, and then concerns about increased pollution from that vehicle congestion. We've done study after study on this corridor to confirm that that congestion isn't going to happen on this stretch, and are going to talk more about that later on in this presentation with some short-term slides as well. And then lastly, is there any way to make the signing and striping for that short-term improvement more permanent, which we'll also talk about in a couple slides here. So that's kind of the summary of where we've talked to you all in the last year or so. I want to open it up to questions about the engagement process. We will get really deep into visuals and what this is going to look like. So if you have questions about what it's going to look like, let's hold on those. But if you have any questions about how we reached out to everybody and the engagement process, please let us know now. Oh, sorry. What, 1 second, Darcy.
You had said something about York is a neighborhood street. I thought it was, oh, Colorado, is it because of the houses on both sides?
What I meant by that was York is a residential street. So it's not a local collector. It's still an arterial street, but it operates as a residential arterial street because it has the houses on both sides. Exactly.
Okay. So they have that on Colorado Boulevard. Is that considered a neighborhood street too, or a residential street?
It would be a residential arterial is the type of categorization for it. So again, we treat those roads a little bit differently than when we would have a lot of our commercial areas as well. So it would still, the land use is residential while it's still an arterial street traveling through the neighborhood. Devin, are you seeing any questions come through on the chat?
Thank you. It's really more of a comment that I feel like you may have gotten a lot more participation in that most recent meeting after you had flyered the houses. Because living on York, I understand there's the signs that you put up, but I wasn't the only one who was not as keenly aware about these meetings until I got the actual flyer. So something you might think about in the future. I don't know how much of a burden that is to do that, but I think that had a big impact.
Appreciate that feedback. And yes, we absolutely will continue to flyer going forward. Devin and I got to spend a good couple afternoons doing that as it warmed up out here. All right. Oh, one more question.
I also have a concern about the outreach. I had no clue about these meetings until 2 weeks ago. And I lived in the neighborhood. I finally realized the signs I thought were like city market signs were actually signs about this meeting, but the type is so small you can't read them unless you're walking. You can't read it from a car. It needs to be more outreach on side streets, which feed into York Street versus just on York. I mean, the signs are like, there's so much information on it. This type is so small, it's impossible to read them. I mean, you need to put up like a legal looking sign, like a zoning change, or be nice to hear about this stuff.
Absolutely. No, definitely hear you on those yard signs as well. And we have made a point to put it at the schools and the parks within the neighborhood, but we'll look at increasing that signage at the intersections as well on those cross streets. All right. Jump to, oh. All right. So that's kind of how we primarily how we got here via the outreach. And then with that information, we did an alternatives analysis as well. So how we got here, I guess, coming from the city side of things, why this corridor was originally identified as a project or a corridor in need of improvement. Over the last 3 years, last 5 years, there's been a pretty significant crash picture here. York is on the high injury network. For those that have been here for the full year of this outreach, I do apologize that I've repeated this a million times, but the high injury network is 5% of our city streets that make up 50% of our serious and fatal crashes. So on York specifically, there have been 3 fatalities in the last 5 years. Those 3 actually occurred in the last year as speeds have been seeing, as we've seen an increase in speeds in the last year and a half on this corridor. Over the last 5 years, we've had 17 crashes involving serious injuries. That means anything that requires a hospital visit or greater. And then over the last 5 years, we've had 600 crashes involving minor injuries, so not quite hospital visit, but still injuries or property damage only. Of those serious and fatal crashes, speeding was always the top contributing factor for those crashes. On the fatal crashes that we saw, on the crash report specifically, it said the vehicle was operating at highway speed or greater. That is a very large concern when we're talking about a corridor that, again, goes through a neighborhood such as York Street. The top 3 crash types was front to side, front to rear, and side to side. What that really means is a lot of left turn crashes occur on this corridor. Front to rear crashes happen when there are left turning vehicles turning from a through lane or right turning vehicles through a through lane. And then side to side crashes, that's typically a side swipe crash. Those first 2 really do result in those serious and fatal crashes. Side swipes, not so much, but with these improvements that we're presenting, we will see that reduction in all 3 of those crash pictures. So goals that were generated from the public outreach as well as the analysis done internally was always making sure that multimodal improvements are included on this corridor, meaning that all roadway users have access to this corridor and can use it comfortably. Safety is the top priority. As we discussed on the last slide, there's a high crash picture here. We want to definitely bring that down. Environmental resilience. For those that were involved in phase 2 of the public meeting and were involved in the 300 responses to the survey, a lot of concern about tree removal. That is not happening. We said it last meeting, but I do want to reiterate, trees are staying on York. Connecting communities and supporting communities. Once again, crossing York and then crossing through those neighborhoods north-south. And then transit infrastructure, making sure that the transit infrastructure is still operating as well as it is, or having improvements at the specific transit stop locations. And then lastly, transportation equity, making sure this is an equitable project across the city. It's a very busy slide. We're not going to touch on every single one of these. The slides are available online as well. And we're just going to run through a couple of them and just talk about the objectives for each, but not go through each evaluation factor, just to kind of explain how we got to, again, these final designs. The corridor, so for multimodal, corridor should serve pedestrians and cyclists as well as drivers and automobile drivers. Network gaps for all modes should be eliminated. There's some sidewalks missing on this corridor. There's some left turns that are currently not allowed that are going to be allowed as a result of this project. Safety is a top priority. Again, top goal of this is removing this corridor from the high injury network, prioritizing the reduction of crashes of all types, and then reducing speeds to match the local character of this neighborhood. Environmental resilience, again, encouraging active transportation. This doesn't mean we want you to, if you want to drive and that's your main mode of transportation, that's always going to be your main mode of transportation. That can still be it. But the people that do want to be able to get out and walk or ride their bike should also have that opportunity. Again, reduce reliance on automobiles. For the folks that want to drive, that is completely fine. But for the folks that want to be able to get out and walk and enjoy York as a comfortable street, we want to make sure that's an option for them as well. Minimizing gaps in the tree canopy. Say it again, say it 100 times. Trees aren't going anywhere. We're good on that one. Community, making sure we can cross York, linking the neighborhoods in the north-south connection. And then increasing access to neighborhood amenities. There are some of those small commercial pockets along York that, again, we want people to be able to get to using all modes of transportation. And then lastly, for transit improvements, preparing for transit improvements in the future on this corridor. As our transit network builds out, this could be a longer term transit priority corridor. As of right now, we are keeping things as they are with our service times. Improving existing transit stops for comfort and amenities. A lot of our transit stops right now are just concrete slabs. We understand that. We're looking at how can we improve that? How can we make them feel more safe, more comfortable, more convenient? And then lastly, maintaining that state of good repair for the transportation network. And then equity, focusing on the high need areas that have been historically underserved. And then obviously better servicing all users of all abilities. So making sure that this is ADA compliant across the board as well. So again, based off of everything we've heard publicly and then everything we've heard after our analysis, alternative one really matches both of those, really showing that two-way conversion on the north segment and the south segment, and then 4-lane to 3-lane conversion on the mid segment. So I teased it enough. I'm going to give it over to Eileen, and she's going to show you what this is going to look like, rather than just talking about some slides. We do have a quick moment for questions. Apologize if anything that didn't make sense. Please let me know. Do we have any questions regarding the alternatives analysis that we completed? Yep. Sorry.
So if speeding is the issue, why does taking away one lane of traffic, which is needed, going to solve the speeding problem? I mean, people speed no matter what, how many lanes you have, don't they?
So it's FHWA has a proven safety countermeasure, what it's called, to reduce speeds on streets to get people to go the speed limit, not to get people to go below the speed limit. Dropping a lane does result in speeds to be reduced. The reason being is because it increases congestion to the one lane, but it doesn't increase it enough to increase travel time significantly. When we have a road like York, where we have 4 lanes currently, and our ADTs are sitting at about 19,000 vehicles a day on volumes, we do not anticipate seeing a time increase, but we are seeing a speed decrease. And the reason being is because that FHWA proven safety countermeasure from 4 lanes to 3 lanes will, and I think we have a slide, from 4 lanes to 3 lanes will, the threshold to reduce 4 lanes to 3 lanes is 25,000 vehicles. So if we're sitting at 19,000 vehicles, we shouldn't expect to see increased delay, but we will see decreased speeds.
So if your changes don't work, are you going to make another change back to what it is now, where it does work?
We're not going to change back to what it is now because there's a serious and fatal crash picture on this corridor, but we will reevaluate if there is something that needs to change, if a new crash picture is developed or increased congestion is an issue.
Because I live on 26th Avenue and they put a stop sign in to slow traffic down on 26, which was from Colorado to York. It's pretty fast. It slows some traffic down, but some traffic blows right through the stop sign at full speed, which creates even a bigger potential problem for serious accidents. So, I mean,
but let's talk about 26th at that intersection after the meeting. We can have a conversation about that specifically. Right now, we're going to talk about York.
I'm talking about a concept of just putting in, like a stop sign to slow traffic down doesn't mean it's going to slow traffic down. I mean, when COVID hit, people stopped stopping at stop signs. I mean, it's crazy. It just blew right through there if there's no traffic coming by, and kind of concerning.
Absolutely. And that's why we're looking at these types of projects so that we can reduce those crashes that are results of people that are driving recklessly.
So one thing that I heard in the last meeting that might help answer the question was about the turn lanes sort of creating, instead of a straight shot through the corridor, more of a winding path where, like, when you have to go around the left turn lane, the road curves a little bit. So it's one lane, but it's not like an arrow straight lane. It kind of has to wind a little bit, which was another thing that I thought might reduce the speed.
That is true. So in addition to dropping from the 2 lanes in one direction to 1 lane in each direction, and thank you for that, the chicaning, it's called chicanes, and it moves traffic through the corridor, again, in a chicaning manner. So kind of weaving from on curb to off curb. Where it is off curb, that's where we'll have on-street parking as well, which is also a speed reduction factor. So we're gonna have one more question, then we'll jump to our long-term corridor vision.
My question is not necessarily a corridor traffic question. The terminology that you use around equity, one of the goals of the project being equity. How are you using equity in this, right? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it's just been on my mind.
No, absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. It can mean multiple things in this. We kind of focus on it in 2 regards here. One, we have a thing called the Dottie Equity Index. It's areas that have been proven to be underserved in our improvements over the last 50 years or even more. Specifically, Larry Swansea, where we haven't had as many improvements that have and have had things like Josephine turn into a freight route. We understand that that area has been underserved, does not have the improvements that other parts of the city have seen. So we're making sure we're focusing on segment A in those types of improvements. In addition, equity means how do you get around? For folks that are wheelchair bound or folks that are pushing strollers, we want to make sure it's equitable for them to be able to get around as well. The same way someone that can walk, someone that can drive, someone that can bike on a corridor. So it's kind of 2 different. There's many ways to talk about it, but those are where we're really focusing on it for this corridor specifically. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Eileen for the long-term corridor.
All right. Now, all right, hot mic. Again, Eileen Yazzie, been working on this project with Denver Department of Transportation Infrastructure since the beginning. And if I could also add about equity, I think one of the areas as well, since we're talking about transportation and improvements, is what Mike had mentioned is the corridor right now, again, is a bit built for people and vehicles. So let's ensure that the improvements and the vision that we're creating is also equitable for people that are taking transit, people that are walking, and people that are biking that don't own a vehicle. So that's also, I think when we start walking through the long-term vision corridor concept, you'll start seeing those elements come through. So it's about removing barriers as well for people using all different modes, not just the vehicle. The way that this next part will stop, or I'm just going to actually use my slides as the cue. So again, what does this vision actually kind of mean from a word perspective? We're trying to embrace all of the goals that were set out through this project through previous actions and realize those through alternative 1. What we've said previously, segment A again, from the 2 one-way streets, we are doing a 2-way conversion. So each street will be in both directions. Segment B, since we're doing this conversion this summer for the short term and paving, so it's maintaining that 4 to 3, 1 lane in each direction with the turn lanes. And then segment C, which we'll go into, is reconfigure that segment for safety and multimodal. And you'll see in a few things that we're leaving a little bit squishy, but also putting our vision down that we know we need to reconfigure that. And it needs to be based on safety and responsive to multimodal needs, with the understanding Colfax BRT is coming in, and we'll go into that in a bit more. So this is segment A. I'm trying to think if I can get this to play. So this is a visual of what Josephine can look like in segment A. Some of the benefits that are outlined is about improving the access for people living in this neighborhood. We're also, again, with also a big thing that has been proven time and time again is when you do these conversions of 1 way in each direction, you actually reduce your vehicle speeds as well as the miles traveled, because you're not actually going through the different couplets and they're not this straight shot. So, and as well as this, we would reinstall on-street or keep it with on-street parking. As well as, again, we're looking to improve conditions for people walking and biking. As well, we are with the wholesale change that we'll show visually about how to access Josephine, we really think that and are anticipated that the freight vehicles will be much lower on Josephine. Segment B, would keep the short-term concept that's heading in this summer. It would keep that going. And again, Mike just kind of talked through a lot of the benefits, so I don't necessarily need to go through that. More complete street. As I will note, one thing that was mentioned by one of the members of that are here in the public and in-person meeting is about the meandering. So we're looking to do those improvements to benefit both the east and the west side of the street. So, and we have the corridor roll plot out, as well as we'll be going through the online meeting segment by segment or block by block with the long-term corridor vision of what that looks like. So certain parts of the street, there'll be improvements on the east side. That could be hardscape filled in with greenscaped and green infrastructure. And then it meanders over to the west side and then has additional left-hand turn. So for segment C, as we get further down, and this is just a visual of the alternative one. Again, if this were to convert to a two-way street, we do want to allow some flexibility, and it's really because of the Colfax BRT that is coming in. So we want to recognize that there is a need, and we have options to start at to reevaluate in the future. And this goes back again, Colfax BRT, we don't necessarily know how people are going to change their behaviors. Will there be everybody walking down York and Josephine to get to Colfax BRT? Will people be using this as a bike corridor? So, and where are people that are using their vehicles? How are they getting around? So we really want that to open, be functioning for 3 to 5 years, and then see what that kind of those behaviors of people needing to use the BRT and as well as vehicle patterns, and start understanding that a bit more before we move forward.
And Eileen, can you
Yes.
explain what BRT is for folks who don't know?
Thank you. Bus Rapid Transit. So I'm not going to go into all the details. So Colfax, I believe it will be, it's in final design, I believe, right now. I'm not too sure when construction is. They will be putting the bus in the middle of Colfax, and it will be running at a more frequent time, between 5 and 10 minutes, and will have its own dedicated lane. So on that, it's going to be extremely competitive or even faster than driving a car on Colfax. So this is really, again, in response, it's the highest bus route, I believe, in the state. I know it is in the city. I'm going to say a state and say the state because I feel confident saying that. It really is. On that, I want to present some corridor vision elements that, again, you'll start seeing how they respond to the project goals that were established, and as well as, not to say everything's equitable, but I think really provide response to the vision. So safety improvements, in addition to the roadway itself being reconfigured throughout this corridor, we're really looking at one thing that was mentioned out of the gate back in last summer was, again, how do I cross Josephine and York and feel much safer? So really looking at almost every intersection and doing improvements with those proposed curb extensions so that people feel safer and have better crossing times. Left-hand turn lanes, there's major safety benefits, and this also is responsive to the crash picture that Mike mentioned earlier. There's a high amount of people, again, having crashes that are related to turning movements. So this, again, with the configuration of the reconfiguring the corridor from 4 lanes down to 3 lanes or 1 lane in each direction, we're providing additional left-hand turn lanes, again, that safer place for vehicles to turn and move from there. Greening the street, it's essentially, we are doing, I would say, kind of throughout the whole corridor, we are recommending that every place that we are saying that there's, we need to move curb or we can add pavement, that we are looking for green infrastructure. I will also note, particularly in segments A and C, so North 40th to 47th, and then 18th down to Colfax, we really our recommendation is to rehab and upgrade those amenity zones. That is where we are lacking trees. Not only grass, I mean, there's grass out there, but I really think that the tree canopy, and that was one thing too that we heard as well, again, from public feedback and comment is about, you know, is there any way to even combat the noise, say from York and the freight movements and the pollution? So really looking to add the trees and revision that, those two areas specifically. And then anytime that there's, again, we're looking to do that improvement with some hardscape, we're hoping that we can get in the green infrastructure and additional landscape. Transit improvements, I apologize about this highlight. That was a note to myself to make that actual change, which I did not do. It's on the board. I will visually say, or I will tell everyone what an upgrade to type 2 is. So one thing is there's 27 bus stops in segment A and B. I believe that there's 2 in segment C, but this really is recommending upgrades to those bus stops. We did some bus stop consolidation. And what that means is that currently right now, specifically in that, I would say between 30th and 39th on York, there are bus stops that are, I would say, like siblings. So northbound, southbound, those are the sibling bus stops to get on and off the bus. There is no safe crossing. We can't do that. So on this, it's really about consolidating and ensuring that we have safe crossings for people that are riding the bus. Inline bus stops, again, we're ensuring that the people that are riding transit have that same opportunity to be on the corridor traveling at a reliable and safe access. Upgraded type 2, the picture is on the bottom left. So that really means we're putting in benches, hopefully a shelter, lighting, signage, as well as with a trash can or trash receptacle. Also, this was a silver lining recently found. We have heard through the whole project about bicyclists and addressing the need for bicycling on the north-south corridor is highly needed. Right now, another parallel project that's happening at Denver is the bike plan update. They've heard a lot of comments as well that support this. This is not a final recommendation. This is not 100% stamped. This is our recommendation that we're putting towards the bike plan, where we have, again, working with them, mainly Mike working with that team internally at Denver. They have found an option of how to get a north-south corridor. Do you have a question? Can you wait till the microphone gets there? 1 second, we just have a quick question. Okay, we can talk afterward. So with the bicycle route, the north-south, so if we start from the top from 47th to 40th, we would be looking to have Josephine, again, which is now a 2-way street. We would also lower that down to be the, is it neighborhood collector? Neighborhood, oh, no, but what's the name of the street if we turn it to the 2-way? Neighborhood, like, right now it's a collector, right? Thank you. So Josephine would be lowered down and termed a local road, which again is what we want it to be. So on that, we can put a neighborhood bikeway through that corridor. You'll see some barriers removed at 40th. We're hoping that we'll create our own shared use, multi-use pathway in removing Josephine as it's known right now, the curve. And then as well, once we head south of 40th, 39th down to 37th, it would be a shared use sidewalk. So we would expand the existing sidewalk. One of the things we learned is that there's wet utilities, water, sewer underneath that area, and we cannot plant trees right there. So let's widen that sidewalk and let's make that a shared use path. That also supports the connection to the greenway pathways. And then when it comes to, well, we can't put bikes on York because there is no room and we're not removing trees. So let's put it on one of the parallel streets. Let's put it on Josephine. Let's make Josephine a neighborhood bikeway. So that's one of our proposed solutions. And then when we get down to the golf course and the city park, is that we would expand what's currently there and to be that multi-use trail or shared use pathway, hovering around that 12 feet area. And then when we get further down to that 18th to Colfax area, again, we're leaving that area flexible. We know it has to address bikeways. We have an alternative in there that we've studied. Again, a lot of huge support for that. And it can happen if we can reconfigure the roadway. So if we do the 2-way in each direction on York and Josephine, there's enough room to put in a protected bike facility if that's, our further connection. The next two slides are about removing barriers. I'll start on the left side of the screen. So 17th, 18th Ave. One of the things that we heard is, and as well as we've walked the corridor multiple times, it is super hard to figure out where to go, where the sidewalks are, how to get from point A to point B. We're proposing, and we've looked at, and as well as you have 2 one-lane roads meeting each other. So we have tested and modeled and again, kind of looked at putting a roundabout and freeing up that space to turn possibly back into the park and make that area more active. It works. One of the things that's noted on here in text, the improvement will need a future evaluation. So on that, this is not fully saying that this is the actual design or the roundabout. We know we've tested, I think it was actually, I'm looking at you, 4. We looked at 4 different roundabouts. There's many more. There's a really cute term called a peanut roundabout. I think it has like 2 parts to it. I just like saying a peanut roundabout. So know that in the future, when the Colfax, when that segment C comes up to be reevaluated, we will be looking at the roundabout as well to ensure, again, safety, access, and seeing if we can, again, use some of all of this land that's designated right now for vehicles is to limit that. On the right-hand side, you will see that we're really looking, this is part of the reconfiguration of how do we get currently 2 one-way roads into 2 two-way roads. And the idea is we would push all the traffic and vehicles, they would stay on York. There is no more Josephine until you have to make a right-hand turn. So at 40th, essentially, there is no more Josephine. We turn that into a shared use path. Or again, if there's a future development, again, we ensure that that access is there. And so all vehicles, including the buses, would continue on York. If you need to go to Josephine, then you would make a right-hand turn on 41st Avenue to get to Josephine. So that's your way in and out. And that really, again, when it comes to that freight movement, that's where we feel as if a lot of that freight movement, because they're not going to want, there's no need with I-70 access to go to Josephine. The other one, since the public meeting in December, I actually felt, I call this my Christmas gift, and it's not even mine. I would say it was a Christmas gift. And I have, for some reason, this is stamped in my brain. December 18th, Mike forwarded me an email from one of his counterparts who had been working on the I-70 and said, hey, we actually have this already agreed to by CDOT. It's actually in a legal agreement that CDOT has agreed that they would essentially turn back the bridge that's currently right now for vehicles on Josephine and reprioritize that for people. So that's again about kind of removing barriers and thinking of those connections. And while there's again much more that could come or that will come in a future phase of this project, what does that green space look like? What is that right now? It's concrete. What could that look like? That would be determined in the next phase. But this, again, right now we have CDOT's agreement that this can happen. On that, one thing I want to note, kind of tying back to equity, this is our recommendation for implementation, and this goes back to looking at areas that have been disinvested for numerous decades. Our recommendation is that we would move forward with segment A first. We are hoping there's a federal government program out there called Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods. It's a national competitive program. They have billions of dollars available every year. Denver was successful recently with another roadway in receiving this funding. We've looked at this program, a lot of the goals and priorities for that program. This project, specifically in this section of York Josephine, it sings, it matches, it is a high, it scores very high. We're really excited about that. Segment B, the reconfiguration of the roadway will happen with paving this summer in 2024. In the future, again, look 2-3 years, evaluate, and then move forward to solidify the improvements, make any changes that are necessary. Also, during this time, we recognize that there's a number of old signals out there. They're on span wire, right? You can see them when you're driving underneath them. It's just the wire. It's not on poles. Denver will be moving forward and applying for funding through some other competitive programs with CDOT and Colorado Department of Transportation, as well as the regional agency, which is Denver Regional Council of Governments, to get funding. And then segment C, as I feel like we've mentioned a few times, Colfax Bus Rapid Transit needs to be built. We need to see how those travel behaviors are functioning, and then we would move forward with that. I recognize that's a lot. I will note for people in person, there's lots of information on boards as well as with a roll plot on a long table here. For people online, we will be going block by block afterward and allowing for questions and kind of that deep dive into that. But right now we can definitely pause. Mike will be talking for short term for about three things, and we also have that too, but now we can ask questions and have a discussion.
You were talking about the curb bulb outs and the greenscaping. Is there funding for that, or is that just kind of at the design phase?
So that actually goes back to this last slide. So we are in the design phase. We do not have funding for that yet. We're in the planning phase, but we will be in the design phase shortly. We need to get funding for design and construction. The Reconnecting Communities grant that Eileen just spoke about in segment A, that's where we would get the money for segment A. Segment B, we look at other opportunities for these larger infrastructure type of projects, whether it's GO bond or GEO bond dollars, or even just typical CIP asks or other grant opportunities. So not funded yet, but now we have the path forward for what we'd want to do here.
Hi, I've got two questions on segment B. So I'm wondering, with the addition of the left turn lanes, at the intersections where there are traffic lights, will there also be left turn signals added, or has that been deemed unnecessary?
There will not be at this time. In the short term specifically, there will not be, but we will be. I can show you on the roll plot after this what that will actually look like, because we've designed them in a way where vehicles making those left turns aren't having their vision blocked by the vehicle in the opposite direction making a left turn. There's no way to describe it without showing you on a map. So I'll if you want to come back to the roll plot, I can show it to you afterwards.
And I hope I'm not repeating myself. Denver will continuously apply for funding to get those signals rebuilt. They're on the signal rebuilt list here.
Yep. So you did already say that, but yes, the span wire signals are already on the rebuild list. We've already applied for four of those signals to be upgraded through a CDOT program. We have not heard back yet if we've been awarded those dollars, but I think that's for 2027 when we'd be able to, if we are awarded those dollars, the existing signals that are span wire could be upgraded.
And my other question is just about the hypothetical bike lane on Josephine on segment B. Are you able to share any changes, like what Josephine would actually look like, or what would be different?
That's something else that I can provide to you. It's called a neighborhood bikeway. We have actually each of our bike lane types available online. If you search Denver neighborhood bikeway, it'll give you the full description. Real high level, it's not what you'd imagine like your typical bike lane where there's a true lane. It's actually improving each intersection to reduce speeds and make it more comfortable for a bicyclist to ride in lane on the corridor.
Thank you.
Can I ride my bike?
He asked where he could ride his bike. Yeah.
We have a question. Where can a young resident ride his bike? That is the plan for Josephine. We will want you to ride your bike on Josephine once this project is completed.
Yeah. And then just a follow-up question. Just if you need a toot your horn for the shared bike path where the previous street is, like, I think that's awesome. We walk regularly along that road. My one question would be at 40th and Josephine/York, that light right there, we regularly try and cross that because we live on 44th to get to the Greenway. I don't really know the solution, but just kind of planting seeds the trucks that are turning left onto 40th, they can't necessarily see us crossing because they're so far back behind the train. So it's just really risky trying to like cross there because the trucks are so tall. Like he's so tiny. They just don't see him, which I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm not saying they're bad drivers. It just is it's a really tricky spot to see people. And then my additional question would be, I mean, traffic's definitely reduced if it's not just feeding straight from that corridor that comes up like from south of York. But it's really difficult to ride bikes north of Josephine or north of 40th. And my main concern is we live on 44th and Josephine, and there's an accident on that corner, like probably every 2 weeks. And I would just hate to see bikes streaming up that corridor and there start being bikes involved. Because it's a shame when it's drivers and they're in minor accidents, but I don't know. I just don't want to see people flying off bikes.
No, absolutely. So first, to answer the first question, for the left turning vehicles. So what's shown here is, and we can show you in more detail on the roll plot as well. The intention here is to actually potentially have a bike and pedestrian bridge over the rail and 40th. This is why we're going after grant dollars, because that is not a quick build improvement. That is a much larger infrastructure improvement. So it would completely eliminate the need of, or the concern of that crossing of 40th and the rail line. And that's why we're proposing the bike ped bridge, is because of those two very uncomfortable connections. And then regarding 44th and Josephine, similar to what I was describing, Josephine south of 40th, what would happen north of 40th is it wouldn't just be a typical bike lane. It would be, again, improving intersections to make it more comfortable for cyclists rather than just having the lines painted on the street saying, hey, this is where you're going to go. Always, and this is a bike program across the city now. It's there's a full document written about it called Don't Give Up at the Intersection. And it's explaining exactly what you're explaining, is that's where the crashes happen. So making sure there's bike improvements at those intersections.
Should I go? Is this on? Okay. So I have a couple. So with the shared use and multi-use sections that are either 10 to 12 or 12, I guess. I mean, I think I would have a concern about sort of the multimodal aspect of that with scooters and whatever those wheelie things are called that you just stand on, like a skateboard, and then e-bikes. So like right now we have in City Park really mixed traffic that's very heavy with multiple modes, pedestrians with dogs, little kids on little bikes, big people on very, very fast e-bikes, and big people on very, very fast wheelie things. And they're all mixed together. And those roads are not 10 feet wide. Those are much wider roads, and it's still very uncomfortable. And I mean, those trends, I think, will only continue. So I mean, like, I love the idea of getting the whole corridor, but if it gets any volume of use of many, many different users, that's going to be a very challenging mix of different things going on. And 10 foot wide is, I mean, if that's 10 foot wide in two directions, that one direction, that makes it better, but still.
And
So,
this is something
yeah.
that across the city we're trying to figure out. That's bike program is figuring out how that operates. We just that team just updated their design standards about 2 years ago, and they're already looking at reanalyzing what those design standards are because of this influx of electrified vehicles.
Yeah.
One thing on the design standards currently, the minimum is 12 feet. So it would, and I know that's 2 feet is not that big of a difference, but just wanted to say it's not 10. It would be a
In one
minimum.
direction.
No, this is 2 direction, minimum of 12 though.
Oh, okay.
So at the least it would be 12 feet wide.
Okay.
If there's additional space, we would make it wider.
Okay.
But that concern is being heard. This project isn't going to be the answer to it, unfortunately, of figuring out the use of the electrified vehicles, but it's very much on the minds of that bike team to figure out how we move forward with our designs of our bike
That's
facilities.
great to know. Thank you. And then the other one is on segment C. Yeah, so I walk this stretch all the time, and I'm curious about the alley, and I'm also curious about your thoughts about redevelopment of the residential pieces. And like so like a block north of there is an apartment building called the York that has an access point onto the street to serve its parking garage. And when I look at that corridor, which has a house that's been condemned, that the city's been fighting with them for like the past 3 years, that seems like the kind of place where you might get redevelopment, and you might want it, but you might want to plan for it in the transportation side of things. And the alley is totally underused because it's just parallel. And basically you get like high school students doing weird things to get into the East High School parking lot. And it just seems like that space of the alley, if you could reuse it. And also think about what redevelopment might look like for that residential block, that would maybe be a good idea.
Absolutely. And I know this is a different transportation planner. There's the community CPD, community planning development department. They have, I know they're looking at this block as long-term through Blueprint Denver is the plan that is identifying where that redevelopment could happen. I don't have the answer of what they're planning on doing. That's but it would be in that plan to tell you what their next steps are there. Regarding the alley and its underuse, we're actually looking at that right now with some of our kind of quick win improvements. We'll say as a part of this project, it's like a small subset of this project to figure out exactly what you described with the high school students that are using it to go on Josephine in the wrong direction. That is one of the biggest comments we've heard for segment C, is that odd maneuver that probably saves them 30 seconds to go the wrong way on York. So we're figuring out what ways we can actually whether close that access or limit that access. Right now, the issue is that's also where all of the trash collection happens on that corridor. So we can't just completely close that alley in the near term, but in the long term, when we're looking at this visionary and what we can do here, that is technically a part of the roadway. We could look at that as well. And then I always just want to point this out because I've been walked this corridor, I feel like 20 times at this point now. Plan for nearer term on this. This sidewalk that is on this picture that doesn't exist right now is on the priority list for when we start ramping up that 307 sidewalk improvement program. So that is one of the deepest, they're called goat paths. I hate the term, but it's when people just keep walking in the same area. It digs into the grass. It's one of the deepest ones I've ever seen in the city. It is the most utilized and it is definitely on that priority list.
Yeah, I have a couple clarification questions on zone B. You mentioned, did you say share wire is going to get replaced, or am I?
It's
What is
called
share wire?
span wire. I don't know
Span
if we have
wire,
an
excuse me.
image of it. So so the signals that are on York right now that are just hanging from, looks like a rope.
Right, okay.
Those will get replaced to be like a full signal with the mast arm, so that there's a signal head above each lane. It'll be able to add the left turn lanes, be able to add pedestrian countdown timers. It'll be a fully functioning signal rather than what we have out there, which is just pretty much tells you red or green.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that clarification. Does that also tie into the street lights? There's an overhead line that connects all the street lights. Is there any intention to move that underground, or does that continue to be overhead wiring?
That's the first time we heard that in this year of engagement, but I'm glad you said it because it is something that we look at on a lot of our corridors as undergrounding utilities. So we'll put that comment into this long-term design plan.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. It just seems like a random wire that connects all the lights together. And then I apologize, I did miss the beginning of the meeting. So I understand that construction will commence this summer on the elimination of the 4 roads and conversion into 3 lanes of traffic along the certainly in C and B. Is that correct?
So I'll touch on that after this question and answer because there was a couple updates on that. That's just with repaving though, and it's just restriping from 40th to 18th. So in segment B, it's not going to be the full roadway reconstruction yet. It's just the repaving and then it'll be paint and post to start.
Does that include a new curb as well too? Because certainly with the slope, despite the Montclair Basin and the city park drainage, York can still see some pretty heavy water flow heading north towards the flat. And it kind of overflows. It breaks the bank of the curb and.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
This is just repaving, so there will not be any curb adjustments at this time. I know farther northwest of here, there was a full redrainage project that was completed that I've been told is supposed to help the flooding on York. I don't know a lot of details on it though. So there should be this summer a reduction of that flooding, but I don't know many details. I can get you in touch with that person though.
Okay, so
that's
simply just asphalt repaving this summer.
correct. Yes,
Okay.
this is just asphalt though. Yeah, nothing outside of that. And then the
And then the
upgrades.
restriping to effectively
Exactly.
match the plan, the vision at this point.
Correct.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, a question about the lights. Is timing of the lights a consideration in any of this? Like something you want to readdress? I don't know how that works. Does that play into your model as to how you feel that it affects speeds and congestion?
Yeah,
And if you
absolutely.
allow a snarky comment in Denver, I wonder if it's ever a consideration. I may
So
not be
signal
alone, but-
timing is a part of this effort. For this one specifically, as we restripe, we have done the analysis to confirm that there won't be a need to change the signal timing on this corridor specifically for the short-term improvements. But as we do that longer-term improvement, when we add things like protected left turns, which are the left turn arrows that the signals will have, that's when we'll really dive into that signal retiming as well.
Okay, but as far as like speeding of people trying to catch the next light, or is that something that is looked at when you,
There's a whole
in your models, you know, that
there's
you
a whole piece
put
of that.
together?
It's called yellow change intervals. It's trying to make sure that you're timing your yellows the right amount so that people don't accelerate when they see the yellow. They actually decelerate, which is the intention of a yellow. And I'm not a signal timing expert, but if you want to look up yellow change intervals, or I can get you in touch with the people that can describe that better. Happy to do so, but that's what we're looking at a lot across the city. And then additional to that, the late night signal timing as well. A lot of times we have those what we call green waves, when it's just a constant green light for any through street, trying to limit that so that we do reduce those speeds as well. So that we do have just a couple more slides to go through, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll split off for in-person and online. We have our roll plots as well. I think we are where we are on the slides. Yep. So touched on this a lot in the Q&A as well as just throughout the presentation, but we are, again, moving forward with short-term improvements on York from 40th to 18th Avenue. This is that conversion from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. It'll happen with repaving. It's going to happen this summer. And it won't be, as I answered in that last question, not going to be concrete work. It's really just repaving and then changing the striping and then the occasional adding of flex posting. So here is just one snippet of what that looks like. We have a full roll plot in the back with this as well. So if you want to see what your intersection would look like, but the key elements are all kind of included here. And this actually includes the left turn I was trying to describe earlier, which is a positive offset left turn. You see, we'll start from right to left. The positive offset left turn is putting a painted median between the through north lane and the left turn north lane. I lost my mouse. There we go. Right here. This allows for the left turning vehicle to actually be able to see only the through vehicle going southbound, meaning that I'm sure plenty of us have gotten stopped at a left turn lane and all you're looking out on the other side of you is the car that's trying to turn left in the opposite direction, and you don't know what car is coming down in that through lane. So this allows you to be able to see past that vehicle so that you can make that left turn comfortably. We do have at 22nd Ave, and this is along the golf course this is along the park. There will be parking added as a result of the lane reduction as well. This is again, proven safety countermeasure for speed reductions and also an increase where the demand in parking is happening with City Park, with futures that whatever is happening at City Park in the future when it comes to vehicles, we want to make sure that there is the availability for, at a minimum, the ADA parking as well as the quick access there. At 22nd Avenue, this is where we have what we call just painted bulb outs, narrowing crossing distances for pedestrians. And then again, this is an example of where previously you wouldn't be able to make a left turn at the signalized intersections. We actually are opening those left turns at signalized intersections because of the positive offset, and then making sure we have those left turn lanes at those intersections that currently don't have left turn lanes, that anytime you drive York, you see the left turn lane just getting backed up over and over again from a left turning vehicle. That's where a lot of our rear end crashes happen as well. And then lastly, here is one of those, again, chicanes is what they're called, to kind of meander the lane for through vehicles. Purpose of this, again, is to slow vehicles, but also to be able to add that parking so that your through vehicle isn't driving directly into a parking lane. You have that space for that parking ability. So we have, again, this roll plot in the back for the short term. Happy to answer. Sorry. Long term is in the back, short term is in the front. So we can go through that in more detail for people that have specific questions. I am going to jump to next steps. We can have a couple more questions here, but we are going to send Eileen to the other room in a minute here too. But next steps, we have an online questionnaire that is public. It is on the website now for this project. If you've signed in the sign-in sheet, if you've sent me an email ever, it will be sent to you. We send it to our entire listserv. I think there's about 500 emails on that now. Where we'll use that input that we receive from that questionnaire for that final corridor study. And then the final corridor study will be published in May. Once again, will be circulated through our listserv, through all the channels that we have available. And then lastly, that 4 to 3 lane repaving project will be coming later this summer. Once we know when, our repaving crew is always kind of, working with weather, working with a lot of different things when it comes to repaving. That will also be sent out with that listserv. So with that, folks in person, we're going to have people head to the back if you want to talk about long-term, short-term, which is, again, the repaving project. Head to the front up here. For those that are online, please stay online. There might be a 2-minute kind of break here while Eileen gets situated, but she will run through the long-term designs for you on the Zoom meeting. But this will be the last time we'll be up at the podium. So thank you all for joining us. Really look forward to hearing from you all in person and online in the next few months here. And thanks again.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Someone, if anyone online, and I recognize that, oh, this, hold on, I'm echoing in the other room. Hey, Sherry, is it okay that I talk? Okay, am I good? Can you, but I don't want to be online. Okay, I think it's turned off now. All right, I think we're good. So on this, I will, my teammate Alan, I will also note that this is not my normal computer, and I'm just saying this for technical reasons. The video is at the bottom of the screen, which I'm not used to, so I feel that maybe I need to sit a far away back. Anyway. Alan is going to be monitoring the chat. I'm not Superwoman and tend to not do two things at once well. I'm going to, and also feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself, so we can have a conversation about the long term. And so I am going to, let me get back to this slide. So what I'm going to do now, and I realize going through a lot of slides, is we are going to review, and also feel free, I'm going to go back to this really quick. If you don't have time to stay on, the online questionnaire that is noted here, bit.ly/York Josephine Corridor Study. We have posted the same images that I'm going to discuss right now as a questionnaire. So if you don't have time to stay on, feel free to take the questionnaire at another point. Otherwise, I'm going to get going, and then Alan can help answer questions as well too. You can raise your hand or unmute yourself. So I'm going to start at the bottom segment C. So we are closest to Colfax and 16th Avenue. As was noted in the presentation, we are recommending that we reconfigure the streets for safety and multimodal. We are also recommending that we allow flexibility for the Colfax Bus Rapid Transit project to be complete for us to decide what the final vision is. Are there any questions or feedback that the community would like to share at this time? I'm going to move forward to the next section. This is near 17th Avenue. We are recommending that there is a new roundabout that would be built as part of the long-term vision for this project. What that roundabout looks and feels like and is how it is built will be determined in the future. Any questions or feedback related to this proposal? Can you help with that? We have a question in the chat. And Jason, I see your hand up and we'll get to that in a second. Alan's going to ask a question from the chat.
Hi, everybody. Leslie is asking from the chat, why does the next phase need to include all the way down to First?
One of the things that Mike King, who presented this information about holding for the next phase for Colfax all the way down to First, is we would look all the way down to First Avenue due to the two one-way streets to make sure that if this section from Colfax to 17th is changed from two one-way streets to two-way streets, that possibility could happen further south. With that future study, we would also look to see if it could just happen from Colfax to 18th. And Jason, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I put it in the chat too, and this is really just a comment.
to say, well, first of all, thank you for all of the work that you've done to get us to this point. And generally, I think this plan represents a huge improvement. So thank you. I was just going to say, I'm generally dubious of roundabouts. Not that I'm a city planner, just as a driver, they seem to confuse people and rarely help more than hurt. But if there was ever a place where it might work, I feel like it is this particular sort of multi-directional intersection. So that seems like a great solution to try there.
Thank you. All right, moving forward. We're at York and Josephine where that ends at 18th. And this is the start. Also, what you will see this summer related to removing a vehicle travel lane and starting to add in the turn lane. You can see southbound York, that's where the 2 lanes start to match. And then northbound, you can see that's when the removal starts. And also it's recognized too, here in this visual, you can see that there would be an existing bus stop that would be enhanced as well. You can see visually where it says sidewalk widths vary throughout, rehabilitate and widen as needed. So this is where the possible shared use path for bicyclists and people walking would be upgraded and added. Or it's existing right now. It would be upgraded to be 12 feet. Any questions or feedback? And moving forward north, we are on York between 20th and 21st Avenue. You can start seeing visually a lot more is happening. I say that in general. One, we would have that upgraded signalized intersection at 21st Avenue. As mentioned right now, that existing condition is just wires with traffic signals. Additionally, you can start seeing the gray that's outlined in green. That is proposed hardscape. Essentially, that's saying we would be able to move the curb inward, lay in more concrete. So that would allow new curb, and we would look at the drainage then. As well, this offers the possibility to expand the amenity zone. And what that means is we can look for additional landscaping and or green infrastructure. And as mentioned before, the existing bus stops that are noted in blue, that would be upgraded to include a bench, shelter, lighting, signs, and a garbage can. And then as well, again, we're still adjacent to the park. So that's where the proposed shared use path, 12 feet, would come in. We would preserve the existing trees. So while this is a straight line right now, as things move further into design, it could meander, but again, looking to have that 12-foot shared use path. Any questions or feedback related to this block? Alan, you have one in the chat, I believe.
Leslie asks, is closing the 21st entrance into the park still on the table?
Thanks for that feedback. I am going to make a note of that. And for our recommendation, we can add that question. And as more of a, in the future for design, evaluate closure. Right now, as you can see, it's still open. I'm just taking a quick note. Moving forward. 22nd Avenue to 23rd Avenue. The majority of improvements, as you can see, are on the east side. We would again have these enhanced crossings at 22nd and 23rd. Look to have the existing bus stop upgraded. And then two, again, with the gray and the green outlined area, that would be extending the curb and allowing for the opportunity for landscaping and green infrastructure. Any questions or feedback in this area? Next is 24th to 25th. This, as was mentioned in the presentation, part of, as known, as we have explained, there is a lot of speeding and high crash picture on the street. The idea is that if vehicles are moving and not necessarily driving straight, this would reduce the crashes. You can see the greenscape and the moving of the curb, adding concrete in. It changes from the west to the east side here. And the shared use path, the proposal would continue. Any questions or feedback in this section? Jason, any questions?
Yeah, feedback, again, all really positive. Thank you again for this. I live at the corner of 24th there. Just in the period that this study has been going on, we've seen 3 crashes between 24th and 23rd, one of them fatal. And I think this feels like a very reasonable attempt to do something about that. One thing we noticed living on that corner is there is already a slight sort of wobble in the east side of York Street there, and an awful lot of cars seem to not see it and hit the curb. And I wonder if that's just something you'll want to keep an eye on with the meanders that you have here. Whether that becomes, I don't even know if that's cause for concern for you, but just a little bit of feedback. If you look at the curb alongside the park at 24th, you'll see it's all broken up, and that's from cars and especially trucks and trailers hitting it.
Thank you. I was going to ask for that clarifying comment you just said. It's not the actual pavement, it's the curb.
It's the curb. They curb check where the street sort of just shifts a little bit. And partly I think that's because the lanes are so narrow up here.
Thank you. A lot of these proposed solutions for the vision will actually be implemented in the short term. So hopefully, again, on that east side of the street, where we're proposing again that you can see that the gray green outline area, that would also be implemented in the short term with paint. So hopefully the wobble or that hitting the curb would be minimized in the future.
Thank you.
All right, 26th to 27th. While this looks busy, so one thing to note, on the bottom left of the image, this is where the transition of the proposed bikeway would transition down, or east to Josephine to a neighborhood bikeway. So that's also noted. So that would be, again, a transition area. Noted on 26th Avenue, this is also where we feel really comfortable with this recommendation. There are buffered bike lanes that will be installed soon. So that's where the bicyclists would traverse. And when it comes to the proposed improvements, you can see that this is where the upgrades to the stops would be for the bus stops, upgraded signal as well. And then as noted, the sidewalks as well as with the hardscape, those would be improved as well. Any questions or feedback in this area?
From the chat, Emily wants to know, with all the lane reductions, are there anticipated reduction or elimination of high GVW trucks using the corridor, i.e. 10,000 pounds trucks and semis?
I don't have an answer to that question. I can take that feedback and look into if we can, if there is another north-south corridor, if we could eliminate the freight movements and the truck vehicles. I also want to recognize that it is 7 o'clock. I'm still going to go through this corridor. For those, again, that need to hop off, please know that this is a questionnaire on a form online. You can see these same visuals. The next part of the corridor, as you can see, a lot of the same improvements that we're recommending, 28th to 29th. You can see two signal upgrades, as well as bus stops. Intersection crossings, as you can see, the left-hand turns, and then the rehab and improvements for sidewalks and the landscaping area. Any questions or comments on 28th to 29th? '30th to 31st. You can see the improvements are on the east side of the road. And like, as mentioned previously, improvements to crossings and bus stops. Any questions for this area? Sorry about that. Looking at Martin Luther King Boulevard to 33rd Avenue. You can see the improvements now change to the west side of the street. Upgrade the signalized intersection, bus stops, as well as improvements for people crossing the street. Any questions or feedback?
From the chat, Leslie says, I know York is an arterial, but are there any crosswalks that will have pedestrian prioritized crossings with, it says bag button lights, with button lights?
Yes. One of the improvements right now, or every time that there is an upgrade signalized intersection, it will include the pedestrian signals as well as the push buttons and the countdown signals. And when we do look at this future corridor improvement, we would look at the signal operations and see where, with our counting the people crossing, that's where we can do leading pedestrian intervals where all lights can stay red and pedestrians have about 5 seconds to start their crossing before traffic, again, the opposite way, can go. So yes, that is part of every time that there is an upgrade for a signalized intersection, it includes the improvements for pedestrians, for people walking.
Hey, Eileen, can I just jump in on that? Sorry, I was cooking dinner before for kiddos, but
thank you, Leslie.
So with that, does that then mean that we need to go through a period of time where you're testing the number of pedestrians crossing after these initial improvements are made before you will prioritize pedestrians with those leading pedestrian intervals and that additional functionality, or will that like be present from day one?
The nice thing is we have that information today as well. And this is for a little viewpoint into the day in the life of a transportation planner. We look at those bus stops. We have all the data for ridership. So we use those and we know that almost 90% of the people accessing these buses today are walking. So we actually know, again, and this is one of the intersections with a high number of people walking because of the bus. So this I would see as prioritized for LPIs.
Thank you.
Yep. The next area of the corridor is from Bruce Randolph to 35th Avenue. The improvements stay on the west side when it comes to that kind of, again, narrowing the roadway and allowing for future improvements for green infrastructure and landscaping enhancements. Also, this is two, you can see the bus stops would be moved. The southbound bus stop would be moved south of Bruce Randolph, and we would remove the existing one. And that again is to allow for safe crossings as well as reliable bus improvements or bus movements. Any questions or comments? The next area is 36th to 37th Avenue. Here you can see the improvements for narrowing the roadway, greenscape and landscape that is now on the west side. You can also see that we are doing we're removing the two existing bus stops at 36 and moving them to 37th. Due to the crosswalks, it's a safer, due to the intersection and having a signal there, it is safer and it's just a block away. Any questions about the proposed improvements for this section? Moving north, we are at 38th Avenue. You can see again, the bus stops, we would remove the existing ones. There is no safe crossing to or from those. Again, it would be more at 37th for people using transit. And you can see the narrowing of the roadway happens on the east side. Additionally, this is where the recommendation for a shared use path would be put. We know today that there are water and sewer pipes underground in this area and we cannot plant trees. Any questions about the improvements, the vision improvements for this section? And we're moving towards 40th from 39th Avenue. And this includes 40th. This is the start of the conversion to a two-way street on York. And you can see the improvements and in the green, this would be that we would convert this space to be bicycle and pedestrian only. And that also includes a proposed grade separated bike ped crossing. And one thing to note, we are leaving it high level right now. We're not recommending a bridge or a tunnel. That will happen in the next phase of design. We are talking with the railroads to understand which is more beneficial and could it happen. Their initial reaction is yes, it can happen. And it would be anything to remove a conflict for people walking or biking is highly supportive. So it just needs, in the next phase, we will figure out if it's going under or over. A lot of previous feedback related to this is people would rather go over than under because a lot of those tunnels don't feel safe. On that, any questions or feedback about this vision for this section? Looking further at the one-way to two-way streets, again, we would remove Josephine as a place for vehicles. And you can also start seeing the buses would stay on York. Again, looking to have Josephine become that neighborhood street. We would ensure people have the sidewalks are upgraded as well as trees and landscape are planted to ensure that there are comfortable access to the buses in this area. And additionally, this is where the potential future neighborhood bikeway would start on Josephine. Any questions or comments or feedback? Looking at 43rd to 44th, this would allow parking on Josephine, parking on both sides of the street. Again, we have recommendations to improve all sidewalks and the plant trees and green infrastructure. As well on York would do the same. And you can also see this is where the bus stops would be. Any questions or feedback?
In the chat, Jason says this would be a major upgrade to biking in this part of town. Thank you.
And at 45th Avenue, the corridor continues the improvements. Josephine is the neighborhood local roadway, one lane in each direction, on-street parking, as well as rehabilitating the sidewalk and amenity zone for more trees and landscape. Any questions or feedback? We are at the end of the corridor. This is a lot of information presented on this slide. We are at 46th to 47th Avenue. The big takeaway is we would reconfigure the roads. Sorry, we would reconfigure the vehicle lanes to operate that the bridge on Josephine would be closed for vehicles. As we noted previously, CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, who owns this area and also operates the I-70, is in agreement that this can happen. And looking at this area, you can see every street is now two-way. And the bus stops, there's a few bus stop improvements. And on-street parking would continue on Josephine. Any questions or feedback related to this vision? All right, I want to say thank you, and thank you for your time spent with us today. And there are many people that have attended all previous meetings. We really appreciate your time. We hope that the corridor vision is responsive. Also, a lot of the feedback that we heard today, both online and in the in-person meeting, we will take and start incorporating as we get to the final recommendation and the study report. Again, all of the slides that we just went through, block by block, it is posted in a questionnaire. This presentation will be posted as well. And look for the travel lane reduction project happening between 40th and 18th happening this summer. If there are any questions, please feel free to email Mike King. His email is posted on this slide. With that, that concludes our meeting. And again, thank you so much for your time and feedback.